On a modern map, Uzbekistan can look boxed in, landlocked, far from any ocean, surrounded on every side by other inland states, easy to imagine as peripheral. But that reading depends on which map you are using. Before borders and shipping lanes, this part of the world sat across some of the most active overland routes on Earth. Merchants, scholars, armies, and ideas all move through here. The shape of the country only looks like an obstacle if you're thinking in shipping containers. Think instead in caravans. Uzbekistan is one of only a handful of countries doubly landlocked, surrounded entirely by countries that are themselves landlocked. On paper, that sounds like remoteness. In practice, it means the country was shaped by the routes that crossed it, linking coasts, mountains, and inland trade corridors. And routes reward the middle. The first surprise is not Samarkand, it is Tashkent. A capital of more than 2 million people, with broad boulevards, an ornate metro system, parks, universities, and ordinary daily life moving at the pace of any functioning. Modern city. If you arrived expecting a gateway frozen in blue tiles, the city corrects you immediately. This is not a country suspended in the past. It is a country where the past left deep marks and life continued. The metro stations are worth noting. Each one carries a different decorative scheme: geometric tilework, vaulted ceilings, chandeliers. Built at a moment when Soviet ambition and local craft tradition were pressed into the same space. The result is not purely Soviet, not purely local. It belongs specifically to this place in this history. Above ground, broad avenues were planned at a scale built for a different era of movement, with wide streets and long sight lines that still feel oversized today. After a major earthquake in 1966, much of the city had to be rebuilt, reshaping large parts of its urban landscape. Much of what you see carries a Soviet urban logic, even when the life happening inside it is recognizably Uzbek. Morning in Tashkent means bread stacked in pyramids at market stalls, commuters moving through tiled station entrances, traffic crossing wide intersections, and the kind of ordinary rhythm that no postcard bothers to show. That rhythm is the argument. Uzbekistan is not a remote museum of blue domes. It is a country where geography made cities necessary, history made them grand, and daily life keeps the story from becoming a museum. Once the modern gateway has broken the stereotype, the older scale of Uzbekistan can finally appear. What kind of city does a central inland world build when it wants to be remembered? Samarkand does not feel like a place trying to be discovered, it feels like a place built to announce itself. The blue tiles are not the explanation, they are the evidence. Evidence of a city that for several centuries understood itself as central to the world it knew. 3 monumental facades arranged around a courtyard large enough that a person crossing it looks small by design. That proportion was not accidental, it was a statement. Architecture at this scale is not built for comfort. It is built to be read from a distance, to signal confidence, authority, and permanence. The Timurid period left a physical argument in stone and tile that this city was not a waypoint, but a destination. Geometric tile work and calligraphy reflect generations of craft, while courtyard repairs reveal the site's long life. This makes the history visible in two registers at once, what survived and what was rebuilt. Restoration here is not a simple erasure. It is a decision about what a city chooses to carry forward into its streets, buildings, and daily life. A mausoleum corridor in soft afternoon light shows how intimate these spaces become once you step away from the wide views. A postcard can show the dome from the outside, but it cannot reveal the interior logic inside, where the structure and space are actually understood. Samarkand was also a centre of learning. Scholars, astronomers and mathematicians gathered here in a city building libraries and observatories. At the same time it was building these facades. The architecture and the scholarship were not separate projects. Both were part of the same claim, that power, when confident enough, expresses itself through knowledge as much as stone. Step outside the main monuments and the city has a quieter register. Vendors arrange goods, families cross the plaza. A cleaner works along a wall where tile meets shadow. The monuments do not empty the city of normal life. They share the same ground. That coexistence is part of what keeps Samarkand from becoming a museum. On the map, Samarkand sits along routes that once connected larger worlds. It was not isolated, it was positioned. The city rose here partly because the geography made it a natural gathering point, where routes and people were funneled into the same place. When those routes shifted, the architecture stayed, still visible in the street plan and the buildings left behind. And now the architecture is the route, drawing visitors and scholars and restoration teams back to a city that built its importance into the landscape. But if Samarkand shows the grand face of Uzbek history, it does not show the whole civic machine. What happens when the same history is seen at the scale of streets, markets, courtyards, and water? Samarkand shows what this civilization wanted the world to see. But the quieter streets explain what the famous plazas cannot. Step back from the monuments, look at the terrain. Between Uzbekistan cities, the land offers very little. No coastline, no reliable canopy, no easy water. Oasis cities were not built where life was easy. They were built where water made life possible at all. Where rivers reached from distant mountains, cities formed. They grew dense because there was no reason to spread into the desert. Everything concentrated. Markets, workshops, schools and rest stops for caravans. The logic was practical before it was beautiful. Bukhara makes this visible. Its streets are narrow because shade was not a luxury. Its courtyards face inward because the desert is outside. For centuries, Bukhara served as a centre of trade, scholarship and civic life across this region. Caravans arrived, rested, exchanged and moved on. The bread pulled from a tandoor oven in the morning is not a performance of heritage. It is the continuation of a food system shaped by climate and urban need. Tea poured in the shade of a courtyard follows the same logic. Shade, rest and social exchange are not decorative additions here. They are part of how the city functions. Craft concentrated here because cities generated the trade that made skilled production worthwhile. artisans stayed near the markets that needed them. Water made it possible, trade made it wealthy, density made it resilient. The desert at the edges kept it from becoming something else entirely. Modern Uzbekistan inherited all of this, from its ancient cities to the cultural legacy still visible across the country today. The covered lanes and courtyard houses of its older cities are spatial answers to questions of heat, water and density that shaped settlement here for centuries. But landscapes that support civilization can also be changed by power, planning, and ambition. What does Uzbekistan reveal when the story moves from preserved cities to altered nature? Every city we have seen in this episode was built on water, not just proximity to it, but dependency on it. Rivers and irrigation networks shaped where people settled, and in fertile valleys they helped cities grow larger and more densely packed. That logic held for centuries. In the 20th century it was tested. Soviet planners redirected the rivers feeding Central Asia's interior on a massive scale to irrigate cotton fields across the region. The Amudarya and Syirdarya, both of which once fed the Aral Sea, were diverted into one of the largest irrigation networks ever built. Cotton production expanded, the sea did not. Over decades, the Aral Sea shrank dramatically, losing the majority of its surface area by the end of the Soviet period. Near the former port town of Muinak, ships that once fished open water now sit on dry sand, far from any shoreline. The landscape here is not dramatic in a cinematic sense. It is simply altered, pale, wide, and still. Wind moves across ground that was once lakebed. The contrast with Samarkand's polished courtyards is not accidental. It is the point. The same country contains both. One is carefully preserved, restored, and presented to the world. The other is a consequence of a different kind of ambition, one that reshaped geography itself. Uzbekistan is not a country frozen in tile and arch. It is a country where decisions made at scale, whether by empire, by planners, or by time, are visible in the landscape if you look past the postcard. Tashkent showed that the present is not a footnote. Samarkand showed how much confidence once gathered here. Bukhara and the oasis cities showed that beauty was never separate from function. And the Aral Sea shows that the same water logic that made these cities possible is not permanent. The map that once made Uzbekistan look remote now looks more complex. Roots, cities, deserts, water, memory and change all overlapping. So what do we really see when we stop treating Uzbekistan as a place on the edge and start looking at the cities, roads and exchanges that place it at the centre of the region?